Hello, everyone, and welcome to Books About Books. My name is Lynn Pearson, Information Librarian at the Arlington Heights Memorial Library in Illinois, and I'll be moderating the session today. These novels explore the works of literature, libraries, bookstores, and reading itself. I'm so excited to welcome Amanda Chapman. She's here to talk about Mrs. Christie at the Mystery Guild Library from Penguin Random House. Book conservator Tori Van Dyne and a woman claiming to be Agatha Christie on holiday from the great beyond, join forces to catch a killer in the spirited mystery. Jeannine Cook is also here. It's Me They Follow from HarperCollins. In a magical bookshop where the line between fiction and reality blur, stories and real life intertwine in an enchanting and moving narrative about human connection, the power of storytelling, and the elusive spirit of love. Denise Hunter is here to talk about the second story bookshop. Shelby Thatcher inherits the bookstop of her dreams, but she has to run it with the ex she vowed to never speak with again. Michelle Lindo-Rice is here to talk about A Summer for the Books from HTP. Two estranged friends are brought back together because of an accident. To heal their friendship, they have to face their past and the secrets they have kept for decades. Kelly Rimmer is here to talk about The Midnight Estate. Pulled against three timelines and sent against a Gothic backdrop in an Australian country estate, The Midnight Estate invites readers into the heart of a family's darkest secrets with an absorbing book within a book mystery. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you're here today.
Hello.
So my first question is going to be for Amanda. Amanda, Agatha Christie, having grown bored in the afterlife, is given an opportunity to come back to Earth and solve one more mystery. So that is the story the woman claiming to be the queen of crime tells to your main character, Tori. Tell us about your inspiration behind the book and any research you did into Agatha Christie's life.
Well, I think that's a very diplomatic way of saying, where did this weird idea come from? But I like it. It's a good way to say it. It actually came from my grandmother, who was just obsessed with Emily Dickinson, the poet Emily Dickinson. And she got it into her head that she wanted to collect every book that Emily Dickinson had in her personal library because she wanted, she said, to know Emily's mind. And I was a little girl when she was telling me this. And I kind of had this sense that my grandmother had found this little room and put all of Emily Dickinson's books in it. And then she would sit down and then Emily Dickinson would come in and then they would sit and chat. And I never kind of got that out of my head. So when I decided, you know what, I think I'm going to give this detective story writing, that's what Agatha Christie called them, detective stories, a whirl, I thought, what if somebody were to recreate Agatha Christie's personal library and unwittingly open a very comfortable portal for the queen of crime to come on a little visit from the great beyond? Or maybe just attracting a person claiming to be the queen of crime, which would be a totally different thing. But I thought, so what would induce Mrs. Christie to come to the land of the living? And I just thought about her lounging around in the great beyond and just being, well, I just thought the woman would just be bored to death. You know, everything is known. What's the point? You can't even read a mystery in the great beyond. But what if we needed her like in New York, because I wanted her to be in New York. And it's also the home of her American father and a city she really did like very much. So what if we needed her in New York at this reclusive book conservator to solve a murder? And I thought, well, that ought to be incentive. And so it kind of went on from there. Yeah, so that's how it went on. It did involve an awful lot of research. I don't know if you want me to go into the whole research thing. But
Well,
you
you
know,
are speaking to a group of librarians, and we love research. So,
okay.
yeah, feel free.
Okay, first of all, read all 66 of Agatha Christie's mystery novels, which I'd pretty much already done, but then I read them all again. But then there's real research to do. And the best part is you just get to know Agatha Christie, who turns out is a very funny lady. And you read her autobiography, which is a hoot. And then you read all the best biographies. And I especially recommend Lucy Worsley's latest one. It's very good. Don't read any of the books about what happened during the 2 weeks that she disappeared because nobody knows. So stop already. None of our business is my feeling. And then you watch a few of the TV interviews, there aren't very many, but you hear her voice when she talks, and it's much the same voice as when she's writing. And it just kind of, it's warm, it's funny, it's a little bit shy, confident but shy. And it was just in my head after a while. And then fact kind of becomes fiction, and that's how it moved along. And then there was, research about weird stuff, right? It's a murder mystery. I mean, part of my job is to figure out ways to kill people, but I don't actually know how to kill people. So again, the research, I had to do a lot of weird research on poisons. I had to download, books about poisons. I mean, one that is literally called The Poisoner's Bible. Well, it's not, it's literally called Martindale's Extra Pharmacopoeia, but everybody knows it as The Poisoner's Bible. So a lot of websites with weird titles, that I just hope the FBI never takes a look, because it looks like, things like, there is literally a website called These Green Books Are Poisonous. And I wouldn't be surprised if librarians know exactly what those green books are. And they come up in my book as well. There are green books that are poisonous. Book conservation, a lot of research there. Jeff Peachy does a wonderful conservation website. He'll tell you everything about bookworms, which are real things, which librarians know, of course, to like what happens when a bullet's fired into a book. That does not happen in my book. No books are harmed during the making of my book, but it still was kind of interesting stuff you have to know about. Broadway, cocktails. There's a lot about cocktails in this book. And I don't remember most of my research on that particular subject, but it does show up. Cocktails, a book called Cocktails, How to Mix Them, which is a real book, and it's a wonderful book too, plays a large role. So that's kind of, it was a long, but not at all painful process.
Well, thank you so much for that lovely answer. And I hope you never got the poisons and the cocktails confused, because that would be a very bad day for everybody. Uh, Jeannine, the next question is for you, and similar about inspiration and research. You own 3 bookstores yourself, so tell us a little bit about them and how they influenced the writing of your first novel.
So first, I want to say, Leanne, thank you so much for the invite and for the panelists. It's a huge, for me as a bookseller, I've been a shopkeeper for a while. So to be on the other side is pretty fascinating. And then this is the very first conversation I've ever had. So as a book writer, as an author, as my editor reminds me often. And so thank you all for being a part of this this new adventure. But in terms of the book, I think in many ways, the research is in living it, right? The research is almost like anthropological or ethnographical, where I'm in the moment. I've been in these situations. I've been watching them, not realizing that someday they would all get morphed into stories that make up parts and parcel of the book.
Well, thank you. Michelle, question for you. One of my favorite quotes from your book is that truth continually makes a mockery of those who dare to keep it hidden. And Shelby and Jewel, your 2 main characters, have kept a secret for close to 2 decades. How has keeping the secret impacted their lives, their friendships, and their relationships?
What a bountiful question that is. Without giving too much away, I will say that, truth is something that will come to the surface eventually. And we have 2 best friends who have been keeping this secret in a summer for the books. And when this secret has impacted their lives and their friendship. It's about 2 women who wanted to write, and so they decide to, this is a venture where it was a book within a book, so to speak. And so with this secret, it has impacted their lives in terms of they did not speak for over a decade because one felt it was time to tell the secret, and one felt it's best for me in many respects that this secret remain hidden. And so as a result of that, once, this is the onion begin to unfold, and things begin to unravel, we see where these women end up pretty much in the same situation, but it is, are we more at a more mature place now, and what decisions can we make differently? And this secret has hindered them from, even one of the friends, from having meaningful relationship, and the other one, it has caused her to really be, I guess, possessive with what she has around her. So it's just a wonderful exploration in friendship, but it's also a wonderful exploration in how two people can react to the same situation differently.
Thank you. Uh, Denise, I feel like you also have a great example of two people reacting to certain situations differently with your main couple of Gray and Shelby. So you feature a second chance romance, possibly between them. They both have hurt each other before, and they have to get past that hurt to move forward. As a writer, how is it different to write about new love versus mature or returning love?
Well, I think we all remember our first love and how it strikes us. It's the first time we've experienced these feelings. We've got the hormones of youth, but also we have zero relationship experience, and we have a lack of maturity. So sometimes those things can cause problems between the relationship. And what I love about writing a returning to that first love experience is that now the characters, they have some age on them. They've got some maturity. They've got some experience. They know how to resolve conflict now. But one thing that can happen is that the characters have issues, don't we all? Issues from childhood that kind of crop up when we least expect them, and end up causing havoc in a relationship that could otherwise be healthy. So what I really love about writing a returning love story is that you have two people, they each have childhood issues, and like often happens in real life, is that one person's issues end up kind of triggering the other person's issues. And that's what we had with Shelby and Gray. He had childhood issues that caused him to run from his hometown because he was disliked there. He was treated unfairly there. He ran. Well, Shelby's issue is that she was abandoned as a child by her mother. And so, of course, when Gray left back then, he triggered that abandonment issue that she had as a child. So when he re-enters her life later, she just finds it very hard to forgive him because it triggered that old wound of hers.
Thank you. Kelly, so your book features the estate of Warren Burr, and it feels like a character in of itself. So can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind the estate, what it represents to your main character, Fiona, and the part this old house and estate plays in your book?
Yeah, I wanted to write a story set in a really old, creepy house. I had a friend who grew up in a house just like we're in MIRA, and she was telling me these stories about floors that weren't quite level and creaks in the night that no one could make sense of, and it really sparked my imagination. So I wanted to write a story set around an estate like that, because those old homes bring so much history. It's almost like a character in itself. It brings so much to the story, and it was super fun to kind of picture a place like that. And I used for inspiration, there's about 10 or 15 really old homes in the region where I live now. And so I used aspects of each of those homes to kind of build this fictional Wirrambirra. And for my main character, Fiona, she's grown up in this house. So as a child, it was just normal to her to have bumps in the night and, windows that didn't quite seal, but also all of this amazing history around her. And that inspired and informed her whole career because she went on to work as a heritage architect. And so the story opens with her returning to Wirrambirra after fairly traumatic divorce and the breakdown of her business that she spent her life building. And so it's both, you know, home and comfort, but also it represents this new chapter in her life.
Thank you. Speaking of trauma, Amanda, your main character, Tori, experiences a very traumatic event prior to the book starting. And because of that, she lives a very sheltered and quiet life. So how did you approach writing a character impacted by that severe trauma? Oh, you're on mute, Amanda.
Okay, I'm back. I won't go into unnecessary detail. I won't probably go into any detail, but my own family has experienced probably more than their fair share of trauma. And my husband lived through 9/11. So I have had, unfortunately, some firsthand experience of trauma and its effects, long-term effects, which meant that as I was writing the conversations between Tori, who went through a really terrible time, and this Mrs. Christie, who was one of the first people to really get her to even talk about it. As I was writing those conversations, I wanted to do two things. I wanted to have Mrs. Christie acknowledge and understand the way this very private young woman has decided to deal with her trauma, because it's not what everybody usually expects. First of all, they want you to talk about it, and you don't want it, so that's a problem. And then also, I had Mrs. Christie just trying to encourage her to allow other people to help her along that path. And I really kind of wrote Mrs. Christie as the sort of older friend and confidant that I wish I'd had at various points during my own life. And that was hard to write, but it was good to write.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you sharing that personal part of yourself.
Fine.
Jeannine, one of my favorite quotes from your book is one that the shopkeeper and others quote this passage and portions of it several times throughout the book. But what it says is, a path with no beginning is worth beginning. It is worth it to walk, to stomp, to drag, or drip. And with no knowing of what lies ahead, what makes the path most important are the footsteps that follow. So what do these words mean to you, and what inspiration do you hope readers take from these words?
Yeah, so in some ways they're like an incantation. In other ways, it's kind of it's something of a spell. It starts off, it's a poem in the book throughout, that the shopkeeper, who is our main character, inside of her not quite open bookshop, um, is alone, and someone comes in and actually is quoting her work to her. And this is a poem that she's written many years ago. And this person is inspired by her work, and she's like, doesn't know how anyone even got access to it. And I think it's really interesting because, you know, it is also the story of the bookshop in a way, right? This woman wants to do this thing. She wants to start this path, but there is no beginning to that path. She doesn't know how to do the thing that she wants to do, but it's still worth it. And it's worth it. Why? Because of the footsteps that follow. And with the book being called It's Me They Follow, like that has a triple entendre, right? That it could be, you know, her recognizing that she is worth being followed. It also can be a little spooky, right? Because the book does have some magical, supernatural elements to it, in that what if it is that your ancestors and the people who've come before you are actually now you're following them, right? And so there's all these ways in which that It's Me They Follow can be interpreted, but that is a part of that poem. That poem ends with It's me they follow, it's me they follow, it's me they follow, which is an acknowledgement of that tradition, and in many ways her being reminded of the spell or the incantation that's on her life.
Thank you. So, Michelle, Jewel, your author character states, the best fiction comes from real life. It gives it authenticity. My obvious question then from you is how much of this book and your other books draw inspiration from your real life and things that have happened to you?
Okay. So, this is a book about friendship. And I have been blessed to have some wonderful friends. I'm in my 50s, and so I'm talking decades. I can say the word decades of friendship. And, there are sometimes it's a roller coaster. There are these moments of extreme closeness, moments of distance, but the love and the solid foundation of the friendship is still very much there. And so I think that that's what really draws the inspiration for me. There are times where certain things may inspire me a little bit, but it is fiction for the most part, I will say. Um, and just building these characters, it might be a collage of friends. Maybe that's a better way of saying it, where you take a piece here, a piece there, or if there's a certain scene and I visualize a character, or I know someone that have gone through that, I may draw inspiration from there. But I really have been blessed with really solid friends. And I will just say quickly that, so like a character like Lacey, who was adopted, I have siblings that were adopted, and so that definitely did inspire that there. Yeah.
Thank you. That's what I love about writers. You all find inspiration everywhere. Denise, speaking of inspiration, I'm sure you yourself as an author and a reader probably have spent a lot of time in bookshops. Was there a particular bookstore that influenced the second story bookshop? Because I kind of want to visit it after reading your novel.
I'm glad you asked. I love bookstores. I love libraries. One of the reasons I wanted to write about a bookshop was because our readers are vastly different from one another. I'm sure I have readers from every different economical and background, all kinds of interests and hobbies. But the one thing that we all have in common is that we all love to read. And bookshops and libraries are the gathering place for us. So when you add it to a story, I feel like you've added somebody, a character almost, that the readers already love. They already associate it with good experiences. I myself, some of my fondest early memories are at the library, my mother taking me there. I always thought, that she wanted to take us to the library because she needed to go to the library. But I found out when I got older that she doesn't even like to read. She took me there because I love to read so much. So that's just one little fond memory that I have, and readers also have those same memories. So I think when they come across a book, a bookstore or a library and a novel, they're just instantly attracted to it. And unlike Jeannine, I don't own a bookstore. I don't even own, 3 bookstores for sure. So I had to do a little bit of legwork on this. So the setting that I chose for the town, I called it Granville, but it was inspired and modeled from the town of Davidson, North Carolina. And I always go to the setting where I'm going to write a novel because I really like to immerse myself in it. I like to hear what's there. I like to feel, I like to see what it looks like, and just kind of get a good vibe for the people who live there. So I went there with my husband. And prior to going, I had made arrangements with a woman named Jessica, who is manager of Main Street Books there in Davidson. And if you feel like you want to go to the second story bookshop, go to Main Street Books in Davidson, North Carolina. It's not on the second floor like the book in my story, but it is very much like that. It is warm and inviting. The booksellers are amazingly helpful, and it just feels so cozy. It's the kind of place where book readers love to go. So she sat down with me for a while. She shared experiences, stories, and tips. And basically, I just took copious notes and used them a whole lot as I was writing the story.
Thank you. I have now put that on my list of places I want to visit. Thank you for that travel tip as well as a writing tip as well about your research. Uh, Kelly, so speaking about books, obviously, your book is a book within a book, a story of a woman starting over after a divorce, buried family secrets, conflict between mothers and daughters, and a possible house story. So how did you go about writing and balancing all those elements of your work?
I haven't written a book within a book before, and I was really excited about the challenge of that. And the book within the book, so it was a chance to try and use someone else's voice to write. And that was super fun. So I've written, this is my 14th novel, published novel. And this is the first one. So the book within the book is in third person. And just a simple thing like that, like a shift of point of view, was so much fun to tinker with. And the author of the book within the book has a bit of a different, maybe a more formal writing style in some ways than mine. So it was fun. It was so fun to put myself in the head of someone else and to try and write as someone else. But balancing it all, I kind of wrote the book within the book as its own entity, because it had to work on its own, or else it's not believable as someone else's book. And then the rest of it, because the two do link together, there's a reason the book within the book is there. And so then it was about balancing and making sure that the reader was going to get the right information at the right time. But I think in some ways, of course, editing is always hard. It's always my favorite part of the job, but it's always a part that at the time, I'm like, this is excruciating, but it's always, so fulfilling. But in some ways, it's always instinct when I'm writing, how it's going to balance, and just working at it until my gut feels like it's right, like the balance of things is right. So yeah, that's how it all came together.
Thank you. Amanda, actually a similar question for you. Like the works of Agatha Christie's, readers have to use their little gray cells to solve the mysteries of the book. So how did you plan out your mysteries and keep all the pieces together?
Well, I'm glad you think I did. But I'll tell you, in this, mystery writing biz, it's the big secret. It's all in the outline, and I really hate writing outlines. I mean, I especially hate having to write like 20-page single space, detail by detail, chapter by chapter outlines that you've just got to do when you're writing a traditional mystery, because every clue, every twist, every reversal, every explanation has to make sense from the start to finish. And you've got to get those clues in early and make sure that nobody even realizes they're clues. But, that being said, the upside is once you finish the outline, the book then writes itself. It's just a joyride. Then you just go right through, and then you can concentrate on character and, exciting things and little love stories. And, that part's fun. But the outline is hard work.
Well, thank you for that little behind the scenes peek at your writing and your the way you go about it. Jeannine, your main character, the shopkeeper, has a rare condition in which she passes out after being touched. So how does that condition affect her life and the choices she made? And what made you decide to incorporate that into your shopkeeper character?
Yeah, so I thought that it would be interesting to have someone who wants to do deep work with people in community by opening a bookshop. But the biggest barrier to her doing that thing is that she's afraid to be touched. And I love the metaphor of touch because it works on multiple levels, right? It works on the level of being touched here, but also just like she is afraid of physical touch as well, which happens in bookshops, right? People come in and they've been moved by something and they want to give a hug, or you got to hand them their books. Little children run in and they're so excited, so there is all of this, sharing that really happens deeply in a bookshop. And I also thought it was a good way to think about somebody who is also trying, who can't experience deep love and deep relationships because she's afraid of this element of touch. And so here you have this, she meets this person who is the first person she kind of actually wants to touch. And so, it then leans us in all these different directions. But I like this way of thinking about, it gives us a way to explore the element of touch and what touch does for us and why it's really important for us as human beings, and how it lives out in the animal kingdom. And so I got to kind of play around in that world, and then also play around with it on a more metaphysical level as well.
Thank you, and thank you for, like Amanda, explaining a little bit behind your writing process and how you think about writing your novel. That's really insightful. Michelle, you mentioned earlier about adoption, and that Shelby's daughter Lacey is adopted, and she's been searching for her biological parents. What has motivated Lacey to start that search?
Yeah, I think that when you talk about adoption and belonging, as I said earlier, I have a couple siblings that were adopted, and you know, they feel loved and welcomed and belonging and all of that. But within each of us, I just feel that there's a need for connection. And I saw with my siblings where they wanted to interact with people that look like me. That where did I come from? I want to get that human connection. And so they knew about their adoption. They came at 4 and 6, and so they knew they were adopted. And my parents were really open with them about everything and the past, but they just really wanted to make that contact. And so we do live in a time of social media now. And so, but back then, a few years back, it was just making the phone calls and my parents setting it up and allowing them, and knowing the risks that could come with that, learning your past, and some of the details may not be what you'd like it to be. But that's a little bit of what I believe Lacey was experiencing. And it was just, I just wanted to make that connection. I'm glad for everything you've done for me. It doesn't negate how I feel about you. It doesn't take away the love that I have for you. But, the heart can expand and it can grow. And we wanted to give her that room to explore and to answer those questions. I just know of people that potentially have never met their parents, that it's just a question that never leaves them and they're always wondering. And so I just wanted to explore that in Lacey's character. So.
Thank you. I really enjoyed Lacey and how mature she was for her age, but she was definitely still a teenager sometimes as well. So she's a great character. Denise, you talked about the small town of Granville that you created for your book. And as you mentioned, your main character, Gray, has a bad time in the small town. But there's also Shelby, who is embraced by the small town. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that and how the small town is both harmful and helpful to your characters?
Sure, great question. So, Gray was kind of the town scapegoat. He had a bad time because of who his family was, and he didn't help himself along, when he was a younger also. But he kind of became the town pariah. And because of that, as soon as he was able, he left the town. And of course, this had a big impact on Shelby, who had planned at her young age a future with him. So, but one of the good things that came out of that situation, because we all know that when bad things happen to us, a lot of times it kind of is an impetus for better things to happen. So what happened with Gray is it made him determined to make better choices. His parents were a bad example of good choices. Both parents were alcoholics, and his mom ended up dying in a car crash. His dad was drunk and accidentally killed somebody and went to prison. Gray was shuffled off to his grandmother. So he's just seen the chaos of bad decisions. And I think some of us can relate to that with our own parents. So he was determined to be a better person than his parents. He was determined, unlike them, to get an education. He wanted to own his own store or his own business when he grew up. didn't really know what kind, but he wanted that autonomy. He had had his life messed with so many times by other people that he wanted to be able to make his own decisions for himself. So when he re-enters the town, he's got all of this weight on him. He has to come back because Shelby's grandmother has passed away. And Shelby's grandmother owned the bookshop in the store, and Shelby had worked there for years and had always assumed that Graham was going to leave her the bookstore. That was kind of the understood message between the two of them. But it turns out that Graham left half of the bookstore to Gray. And of course, she reels when she finds this out. This is not the kind of crucible that she wants in her life. But it was kind of Graham's posthumous way of getting the two of them back together because she was such a fan of the two of them.
I mourn for Graham as well because she seemed like such a firecracker. And I enjoyed reading about Shelby and even Graham's grandmother as well, or Gray's grandmother as well. They were both wonderful. It seemed like wonderful, fully developed characters as well.
Thank you.
Kelly, so going from grandmothers to mothers and daughters, what wisdom do you hope that you take from your main character, Fiona, and her relationship with her mother, Jeannine?
Yeah, it's a difficult relationship. It's not what either one of them would want it to be. And I think Jenny's instincts have been to protect her daughter, as most parents feel towards their children. But in her case, that's meant hiding big parts of herself from Fiona. And they can never really know each other properly just because of the vast secrets between them. And so as the story unfolds, the women find a whole new way to relate just by sharing parts of themselves that they otherwise were inclined to withhold. And I think that's something I wanted to explore that, because so often as parents, we just want to keep our kids safe. And of course we do, but there's a cost sometimes to protecting them, even when we're protecting them from parts of our own history that would help them to understand us. And that's kind of the rationale for Ginny's decisions, is that these are things in her life that have been so difficult and traumatic for her to hold on to. And so she never wants Fiona to know about them, but then Fiona's wondering why there's such distance between them. So that was really difficult to write about, but also I think it's something that hopefully readers will take away from it, that people do the best they can generally with their lives, and they're even when they're making decisions that are hard to understand, there's usually a reason for it.
Thank you. So Amanda, the Mystery Guild Library is one I want to visit. I know it's fictional, but there's rooms, for the Christie room, there's an Edgar Award-winning room, there's a Dashiell Hamel and a Golden Age mystery room. So could we expect authors from these rooms to be the next one to come back from the afterlife to solve a mystery with Tori in future books?
It's a good question. And when I saw it, I was like, well, that's a thought. It is a series after all. But no, I mean, I suppose the idea must have occurred to me, even subconsciously, because it can't be accidental that I found myself giving the Mystery Guild Library a Dashiell Hammett room or an Edgar Award winner's room, because and you got a lot to choose from. But truthfully, you know, even if some of the other great ones do show up for cameos, this series is Mrs. Christie's. It's going to stay Mrs. Christie's. I'm not done with her yet.
Well, that is good news indeed. I do really love Mrs. Christie and her delightful handbags and her embroidery and all the other things she brought to the novel.
Now, isn't that interesting? You know, you think of Miss Jane Marple, who knitted all the time, right? Agatha Christie did not knit, but she did do embroidery. That's why she's doing embroidery in the Christie room. That's the kind of little stupid things that get stuck in my head. So I throw them in.
Well, as a crocheter, I appreciate seeing some handicrafts in there. So
There you go.
on with that.
That one's for you.
Oh, thank you. Jeannine, while fairly isolated, the shopkeeper regularly shows up and values her writers group. So in what ways do connection and fellowships like those found in the writers group writers and established writers and emerging writers? And do you yourself belong to a writers group or host writers groups at your bookshop?
Yes, I think that's so much personal. I don't know if anybody else, any of the other writers on the group have ever been in a group, a writers group, or but so many personal things happen in these writers groups. I've been in many of them. There's one that I know of here in Philly that's been around for like 30 years. And so it's the way in which the writers become family. They become her support. They become her, like she says, there's a time where she says something about, you know, in the writers group, they're not worried about touching her because they are able to touch each other in other ways. And so there's this really beautiful sharing that happens in these groups before the world ever sees any of the writing, right? And sometimes they never see the writing because people in your writers group save you from yourself until you don't put that out. And so her writers group, are very much her family throughout, and I've seen those dynamics play out in communities in many ways. One other thing is that so my mother was a librarian growing up when I was growing up, and she went blind when I was about 10 years old. But still remain one of the most avid readers in my life. And one of the things that I realized even with her was that, you know, as children, we had to write for her, read for her, write for her. And it was a connection point for us. It's how we were able to connect. So I think that it kind of just travels through my work, thinking about the ways in which writing and writing communally shapes us.
Beautiful. Thank you. Uh, from writing to sort of a different mode to telling stories of movies and television, Denise, 3 of your books have been adapted into Hallmark movies. So tell us a little bit about the process of having your book adapted. And did you get to go on set or meet the actors or anything like that?
Well, it was actually all kind of pretty wild because the first 2 books that got adapted into movies were adapted or they were optioned within months of each other, just a couple of months of each other. So, and of course, we authors know that just because a book is optioned into a movie, it doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. But in this case, the producer had a really good record with Hallmark, and they did, in fact, get adapted into movies. So the first 2 were actually filmed back to back in Vancouver. Most Hallmark movies are filmed in Vancouver because of the diversity of the environment. You've got beaches, marinas, the city, cozy little bays, and you've got suburbia and everything you could want right there in that one city. So they filmed there oftentimes, and that's where they filmed all 3 of my movies. And to answer your question, yes, my husband and I got to go on set for 2 of those movies. We were on set for The Convenient Groom, and we were on set for A December Bride. And both of those were fabulous experiences. I was so nervous. I was meeting, not only the producer for the first time, but the director and the actors whom I admired from other Hallmark movies. And it was just a fabulous experience. Everybody was so kind. It was a dream come true, as you might imagine, to see all the characters and the setting that you envisioned in your head just coming to life before your eyes. It exceeded my expectations.
That is very awesome. Michelle, in your novel, speaking of adaptions, a plot point is that your author character, Jewel, her first novel, This Was Then, is going to be a network TV series, and Jewel gets to be a consultant on the production. If you were lucky enough for a summer for the books to be made into a TV show, who would you want to play Shelley and Jewel?
Oh my, that is every author's dream, and congrats to you, Denise. Yes, I thought about this, and I think a character that could play Shelby is Casey Fennell. She's a Jamaican beauty queen. And I really love the fact that I got a chance to bring in some of my heritage there and some of the sayings that my parents would say, etc. So I would love to see someone like a Casey Fennell play Shelby. As far as Jewel, Jasmine Sullivan was my inspiration for Jewel. I just think she's gorgeous and talented, and they just depicted them so well on my book cover as well, and I just loved that the artist celebrated the woman and placed them so gorgeously on the cover as well. So yes, that's who I think I would love to see play them on the big screen.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed that we will see a summer for the books, both in our bookstores and on our TV screens. So Kelly, a non-serious question for you, or maybe a serious question. So many townspeople think Warrenburg is haunted. So do you yourself believe in ghosts, or have you experienced any paranormal activity?
Yeah, it made sense just because of the history of the house and the history of the region that people would think that it was haunted. But I'm definitely a skeptic when it comes to a lot of things, until I was talking to my dad and I said that I had invented this spooky mansion on the outskirts of a town where we lived when I was a teenager. And he was a policeman at the time when we lived there. And he said, "Oh, what have you heard about this old mansion? Not dissimilar to the one that I've ended up writing." And then he started telling me these spooky stories of things that he'd seen when he was a policeman, things that he couldn't explain or that he'd heard about that he couldn't explain. And that really got me thinking about, most people have had experiences that your brain just can't quite make sense of it. So even as a skeptic, the more I was writing, the more I was like, no, you can't know everything. And even as someone who questions everything, there's always things that you can't find answers for. And so it was kind of fun to go down those rabbit holes as I was writing, and to hear about stories of other things that have happened to people and they've looked back and gone, okay, there's not really a rational explanation for that. So I'm not saying this book made me a believer, but it certainly was fun to question those things myself and to hear about other people's experiences.
Thank you. Yeah, I find myself be a skeptic, but yeah, there's sometimes spooky things I can't explain. So you all, I cannot believe our time has gone by so fast. So we just have time for one kind of round robin question. So I'll make it dealer's choice. So you can either say what you're working on now, or you can say what you're reading now. So Amanda, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I'm working on book 2. I'm supposed to be on a writing retreat because I'm way behind. But working hard on that. And sometimes when you're really, really working on your writing, you don't want to read other people's stuff, because you want to have your voice, but I can't help it. I got to get to sleep at night, and there's only one way to do that, and we all know what it is. You got to read. So right now I'm reading a hilarious book by someone who's new to me, a writer named Maz Evans, and it's called Over My Dead Body, which I think is a great title. And I bought it because I couldn't resist the tagline, which was, Miriam Pree has been murdered and she's absolutely furious about it. And I thought, well, I have to read that one. So I've been reading that. I read a lot of books all at once, I just picked up Jesse Q. Sutanto's latest Vera Wong mystery because I just love Vera Wong so much. And then somehow last year I missed the latest Kate Atkinson Jackson Brodie book, Death at the Sign of the Rook. And so today I started reading that, and that is fantastic. I just want to be Kate Atkinson when I grow up, or maybe Anne Cleves. I could be either of them. I would love to be either of them. So that's what I'm doing, and that's what I'm reading.
Thank you. Jeannine.
I'll go quick. I am working on a memoir called Shut Up and Write. I don't know if they're gonna let me keep that title. And I'm reading, actually, I have it like August Wilson's biography sitting here, right? As soon as we get off, I'll hop back into that.
Denise, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm working on a Friends to Lovers story that features the wild ponies that live on Chincoteague Island in Virginia. Always wanted to write a story about wild ponies. And when I found out that their fire company takes care of the ponies, I knew it was it had to be told. And currently I'm reading Writing Lessons by Sarah Gruen.
Thank you. How about you, Michelle?
So I'm writing the next Fortune of Texas book for Harlequin, and I am reading my clients' manuscripts because I'm also a literary agent. So that's what I'm doing when I'm not writing.
Gotcha. How about you, Kelly?
Yeah, I've been in a bit of a non-fiction binge this year, which is unusual for me. I read an Annie Jacobsen book in research for one of my earlier books, and I had bought most of her backlist. So I spent the first few months of this year just flying through her backlist, which is so fascinating. She's such a great writer. But for a change of pace, recently I read Beth O'Leary's new book, Swept Away, which is so beautiful and so fun. And next up, I've got I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline, it's on my desk, Jacqueline Harpman, just for a complete change of pace again.
I want to thank all of you authors today. Thank you so much for sharing about your books. Thank you for spending your time with us today. I'm so grateful that I got to read your books and talk with you all. And thank you for all the librarians joining us today. Next, we have 3 concurrent panels: personal narratives, hearts on sleeves, and echoes of war. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.